Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, our 46th podcast in the series. As always, it's great to have you joining us for today's conversation. And today's guest is Gary Brandes, a gentleman who has spent many years as a high school band director in the St. Louis area, and then went on to the University of Missouri St. Louis, where he served as director of bands and a teaching professor of music education. Gary since retired from the University of Missouri St. Louis and is now working with Lindenwood University and developing a band program there. Gary is a lifelong music educator, and he has so much to offer, and his passion is still red hot many, many years after he started. It's a fun conversation, and I know you're going to enjoy it.
Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends is made possible through the generous support of the Eastman Music Company. From the first student instrument to the professional heirloom, Eastman Music Company is committed to crafting the finest instruments for musicians throughout the world. For more information, visit eastmanwinds.com.
Before I get to my conversation with Gary Brandes, I'm going to take a minute to talk about something I came across last week that I want to share with you, and I hope that you, if you're listening to this podcast during the month of March 2021, will take advantage of. Of course, everyone in the nation is now filling out their brackets, their NCAA basketball brackets, and deciding who they think, or I guess the better word is who they hope, will be crowned national champions. From what I've been reading on social media, I know my friends in Illinois are all ate up with Illinois basketball, and they do have a terrific team. And it'll be fun to watch these college hoopsters give it their all come Thursday this week as the play-in games begin. But there's another big tournament event going on that you might want to check out, and that is the United States Marine Band's March Mania event. And it's going on online. And in this one, you have the chance to help crown the champion. Every day during the month of March, the United States Marine Band lists 2 marches that go head-to-head. They have recordings for listeners to hear, and then you get to make your vote. The winner advances to the next round of the tournament. Today is March 16, and it signals the end of the first round, and the winners are advancing to round 2. Now, you can listen to all the marches that have already played, but the fun is to join the fun now, listen in, and cast your vote to see which march will be crowned the 2021 Sousa March Mania National Champion. And not all the marches are John Philip Sousa marches. In fact, as I recorded today's podcast, John Williams' march from 1941 was going head-to-head with Charles Ives's There They Are march. And that was a march I never heard of. So it's fun, and it's educational, and you get to hear some great music. Just Google Sousa's Marine Band March Mania, and it will take you right there. Listen to your choices and cast your vote. And don't be afraid to share this information with your students or colleagues too. What a great activity to teach them about the history of marches and to get them involved in actively listening. We'll be right back with Gary Brandes in just a minute.
This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning, and a proud sponsor of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Listen to what we've been working on in this clip from our podcast. All right, so we're testing out lavalier mics to go along with the Rode Wireless Go. The Rode Wireless Go has a base system that has a built-in mic, and that works great, but we wanted to see what more it can do. So the first thing that we're going to test out, Ward's going to show how the base unit of the Rode Wireless Go performs with vocals and then with some ambient sound. So Ward, take it away.
This is the combination transmitter and microphone. And you'll notice that the pickup is quite good, but it is still just a mite bulkier.
To hear the rest of this podcast, please visit thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning. This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com. Now back to Charlie.
Well, it was a couple of weeks ago, I received an email from our next guest, and he had come across a couple of documents that he found at the bottom of a bird cage, I think, from a class he took with me at Vandercook College a long time ago, back when we both had hair. And he asked if he could use them on his website. And of course, I was just flattered to do that. And as I thought about it a little bit more and started talking to him, I said, man, we got to get this guy on the podcast because he's got a lot to offer. I guess he's recently retired. He's going to tell us all about it. But he's a wonderful band director from the St. Louis area, Gary Brandes. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Charlie, it's so great to be here and be with you again. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you chatting with me. And the last I heard that you were director of bands and a teaching professor at University of Missouri, St. Louis. And then you taught a bunch of years in public schools in Missouri, but I guess you've moved on from UMSL. So what's going on with Gary?
Yeah, it's 41 years, and so I was eligible for retirement, and I thought I would. I wasn't really ready to quit teaching by any means, but I did. And then I was real fortunate. Another private university in St. Charles reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, we've got this band gig open, and would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure." So right now I'm just an adjunct professor at Lindenwood University. And my assignment right now is Wind Ensemble Symphonic Band. And because of the pandemic now, football got moved to the spring. So marching band starts for us in 2 weeks, man. So it's like, oh my gosh, so I'm back into the marching band thing as well. So that's where I am now.
God bless you. Well, tell us about where you grew up and how music became a part of your world.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm getting nowhere fast, Charlie. I'm still right here close to where I grew up. I grew up in Wright City, Missouri, kind of east central Missouri, small rural town, 2A school. There was 41 people in my graduating class, and we were one of the big ones. But there was, two things to do in Wright City at that time, basketball and band. And I was a big wood collector on the basketball team. So I rode the bench, man. So I collected a lot of spinners. So it was band seemed like a natural thing for me, and the bands were great. Those bands, those Wright City bands at that time were just marvelous. My folks took me to those concerts, and it just seemed like something that it was just you had to be a part of, And my folks weren't musicians necessarily, but music was always a big part of growing up at home. Do you remember Reader's Digest, the magazine Reader's Digest?
Absolutely.
So, they used to offer these like vinyl album sets.
Yep.
And gosh, my parents had all of those. And I listened to, that's what they played. They had that music going all the time. Boston Pops, Arthur Fiedler. My gosh, I wore those albums out, man. Listening to Al Hirt play all those trumpet solos with the Boston Pops Orchestra was just great. But there was all kinds of albums they had. So music was a part of my family. And my dad was an excellent vocalist. Didn't read music. He always wanted to play piano. But music was part of growing up, and I have my folks to thank for that.
So what, you started playing the trombone, or did you start another instrument?
No, I actually started on trumpet. Yeah. So, but because in high school, I played trumpet in the high school bands, but then I enrolled also because everything was in the same building. And so then I was part of the middle school band. and I played trombone in the middle school band because they didn't have any trombone players. And so then when I got to college, when I first started at UMSL there, my undergraduate work, there was so many trumpet players in that college band. And I was a freshman, and I wasn't getting to play, man. So they didn't have any trombone players in the jazz band or in the athletic band. I said, hey, I can do that. And so I started playing trombones in all those other bands. And of course, my trumpet teacher at the time was Gary Smith with St. Louis Symphony. He hated it, but he put up with me. He was patient with me. And so then finally, I was playing so much trombone, I just decided, well, that's what I'm going to do. So that's how I became. That's how I hold it.
So did you take private lessons on either trombone or trumpet, or do summer music camps along the way, or anything like that?
So so to be in the Wright City Band at that time, you had to study privately with one of the senior musicians in the band. So my first trumpet teacher was Glenn Neerman, Dr. Glenn Neerman, who's professor of music education at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Wow. And he's past president at NAFME as well. And I spent a lot of time in Glenn's basement, and him making me write out scales and stuff. And so he was my first trumpet teacher. And I took a lot of piano lessons, of course, as well, because Dad always wanted to play piano, and he didn't get the opportunity. My grandmother was a piano player and couldn't read a lick of music. She was a marvelous woman. She was fascinating to watch her play piano. And had just an elementary education. She played piano in bluegrass bands when she was younger, and wow. So it was cool to listen to her play and stuff. But yeah, Glenn was my first trumpet teacher, and he was a close family friend, and we're still good friends. So, yeah.
So did you know you wanted to be a band director when you graduated high school?
Yeah. I don't know what else I would have done. Music was so much a part of where I lived. I was in high school band, and band was a big deal. And I was in the choirs. I was in church choir. We had an interfaith church choir in Warren County, and that group got together and rehearsed regularly every week. And they actually toured the Missouri, kind of the eastern Missouri area. And I played trumpet in that band, and I sang, and I even danced a little bit, And a good friend of mine in high school, Gordon Ring, who was the director of bands at Longwood University out in Farmville, Virginia. Marvelous composer, by the way. I hope your readers will go to J.W. Pepper and check out some of his compositions. I've commissioned him on a couple different occasions. Anyway, he put together this rock band, and he was a marvelous trumpet player too. I sat in a section with him a lot. And spent a lot of time just, what we both did, right? With records and trying to transcribe licks off of, Blood, Sweat, and Tears in Chicago and those kind of things. But after high school, I'm thinking, well, yeah, why not? Let's just keep this going, And my band director at the time also graduated from UMSL, and he said, hey, Brandis, go down and take that scholarship audition. I didn't know much about scholarships and stuff, and so I did, and so it's all history from there. And then.
It's always amazing the influence directors have on where their kids go to college, don't you think?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's remarkable. I've had a lot of students from my last high school, which was in the Zumwalt district with Zumwalt South, that also, not all of them, of course, and but followed me to, once I got there, then ended up in some kind of teaching certificate program, be it after a bachelor and performance or something or whatever to there as well. So yeah, that happens a great deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you get your bachelor's from UMSL. What's the next step?
Find a job, right? So yeah, and I couldn't wait. Charlie, I was naive enough to think, man, I got this, And so as soon as school was out, I just couldn't wait to start working and get out there and start teaching. I student taught at University City High School there in St. Louis, and oh my gosh, that was one of the stellar programs in St. Louis. Well, Roger Warner, was there before he went on to North Texas, and he came from University City High School. That was for a long time that was the best band and orchestra library in the St. Louis area, bar none. Probably it may still be. So I student taught there, and then that teacher took a sabbatical or a leave of absence. And they asked me to stay on. Holy cow, baptism by fire, right? I mean, so it was a great place. So, I mean, there were some just excellent young musicians there. Jazz was a big part of that program. And so I learned I had to learn how to teach jazz right then. Okay. I mean, immediately. And so, man, I spent a lot of time just picking the brains of folks and stuff. But so that was the first job after that. And that got me started. So it was a good job because it made me really work, and it made me really focus and concentrate on what I didn't know, and so it was a good gig. It really was.
Yeah, I'm asking this next question for our listeners. Of course, I ask all the questions for our listeners, right? But especially those younger directors out there. You had several stops along the way, where your last stop, you said, was Fort Zumwalt South. When you were going through your career and you saw you were at one position and then you moved to another position, what was the motivation in moving from one high school to another high school? What opportunities did you see for yourself there along the way?
Yeah. Back then in the late 70s, early 80s, there were lots of band gigs. There were just lots of jobs around. And for whatever reason, people were moving around a lot then. I remember that. I mean, folks were jumping around different jobs. And I don't know why. For me, it was always, there was never that I was dissatisfied with where I was teaching, whether I was working. I mean, I've been really lucky. I mean, Charlie, I really have. All the places that I've taught, the people I've worked with, the students I've had have just been a joy. And there was never a time when I thought, God, I got to get out of here. No, it was never that. It was just one of those things. What's the next piece? What's the next challenge? From University City, I went back to Wright City, Missouri, where I graduated. So I went home, and you can't go home. Well, I did, and it was wonderful. Oh my gosh. I mean, in one of those small rural school, I tell you what, you have to, like I tell my folks in my music ed courses, that diploma is only a license to go and learn your trade. And you find a place where you can just roll up your sleeves and get busy. Wright City, University City was those kind of places for me. Wright City, I did band K 512. There were vocal and general music teachers. I didn't have to do that. It wasn't a K-12 situation, but limited budget, and you had to make it work. I had to learn how to fix a clarinet. I had a sousaphone that was more duct tape than fiberglass, right? Okay, and I wasn't, but the thing played, man, and I wasn't smart enough to know. I remember patching those holes. I wasn't smart enough to know to put something between on the sticky side that covered the hole. So then that hung in the band room. Of course, stuff got thrown down the sousaphone bell. Well, then I'd have to take the thing apart and unclog it because everything stuck to where that tape was in the hole, But anyway, a story for another time. But no, I mean, so I guess in some ways now that I'm retired, I'm still doing that. I'm just, what's the next challenge? What's the next thing? And I just wanted to keep moving forward as best I could. And if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't bounce around quite as much. I'd probably kind of just grow some roots a little bit more than what I did. But all those experiences offered something new for me, and offered a new experience. So from Wright City, I went to Hazelwood, much larger school, and a challenge to work within those because I wasn't familiar with that large kind of program and stuff. So yeah, it was just those kind of what's the next step kind of thing. So
at what point along in your development did you realize, man, I got to get a master's degree? I got to go back. I got to go back and fill in some of the gaps.
No kidding. Yeah. Well, that actually, the motivation to do that was probably that first year out when I realized I didn't know everything I thought I did. But it was 12 years before I went back to start my master's, and by that time I had a lot of questions. Right. I mean, I wasn't, and again, it was just something that I felt like was the next piece, the next step, the next challenge. That was again, that was the late 70s, early 80s. And that was a time when bands were pretty competitive. So it was hard to talk to other directors at times. And so I felt like, well, okay, so if I'm going to figure out how these guys do this, I'm just going to go back to school. And I was fortunate to be able to get in at the University of Missouri Columbia. Dale Lanis was the director of bands there. I got to know Dale through just some clinic sessions he did in around the area. And he offered me an assistantship. And God, it was a great experience. I played in his band. I conducted the symphonic band, the university band. I played trombone and jazz ensemble, and I played tuba in the symphonic band. And so, I mean, it was just all good. And so, yeah, I mean, not only was it a learning situation, but I got to play, and so expanded my musicianship in so many ways. So, I mean, I didn't realize I was going to get into all that, but oh my God, it was a wonderful time for me to do that. And yeah, I had a lot of questions, and I got most of them answered. So, yeah.
So while you were pursuing the master's, did you say, man, someday I want to teach at the college level? Or were you set just going back and doing your high school thing?
I was set just to go back. I mean, I think we all think about it, of course, but at the time I was still teaching at Zumwalt North then. And I just wanted to go back because, I go to Midwest and I hear your bands and I think, gosh, how do they do that? I go to MMA and the guys come in and we had such fine band programs across the state of Missouri when I was in those early years. And how do they do that? So I wanted just to bring some of that back to where I was teaching at that time. I mean, yeah, we thought about it, but I guess we all did. But at the time, I was too busy trying to get my own program to where I wanted it to be. I didn't have time to think about, that. So no, I guess those thoughts were there, but it was really just about getting back and getting my bands to where I felt like they needed to be. I think was my.
And that Fort Zumwalt area, that was exploding at that time, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, so I started at just what is now North. That was just the only high school, and then the next one was South. Now there's an East and a West. So we've got all aspects of the campus covered. And that place has just exploded. And of course now it's moving west. Wentzville is next. Wentzville now has 4 high schools, or will have 4 high schools, and so it just keeps moving. Yeah, I mean it was a great place to be at that time. Of course, we had growing pains, of course, but sure. It was a great place to be. And I had some wonderful people to work with and just great support, Charlie. I mean, I had some great administrators that just thought band and the arts were vital all the time. And I just was lucky with those things. So.
And that's the key. I remember going from when I was at Winnetonka on the Missouri side, and I went to Olathe, and Olathe was just starting to explode, kind of like Zumwalt did.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of administrators that just had your back and just pumping money into the program. And there's no substitute for that. I'm sorry. It's the best.
The principal I had at South there, where I spent the most time in Zumwalt, he was just terrific with that. I tell you what, he was so supportive of not just music, he was supportive of everybody. And I mean, he was a principal's principal, and I was very fortunate to work under him. So yeah.
So you've been teaching at the university level. How did your experience as being a public school band director all those years help you when you took over as your role as director of bands at UMSL and in your new position?
Well, we teach people. We don't teach band, right? I mean, band is a medium. Music is what we teach. And all those places, I just like everybody else. My students didn't study a large percentage, a very small percentage, study privately, and sometimes they were just piano. It wasn't their major instrument. So I was their private teacher, and I just took on that mindset. So I always approached every rehearsal with how am I going to grow the individual, and so then at the university level just translated. I didn't have to teach scales all the time. I mean, I had to teach articulation perhaps and the concept of all that and all, but again, it was about how do I grow those people at just another level through musicianship. ensemble, blend and balance, intonation. Those are all the things that we deal with at any level, right? I mean, so, and it's just at another. So how do I help them? So yeah, I always took that approach as teaching to the individual in the ensemble, and I still do, even with the Wind Symphony. I mean, now that those folks are great players, but I try to help them understand how to listen, where to listen to, how to fit within the ensemble. So, and I, I mean, I don't have to tell them. I just have to remind them, I mean, because they're just excellent players. But it's so, yeah. So that those kind of experiences, and I didn't really realize I was doing that so much. It just became a way until, I mean, I guess the Wind Symphony helped me realize what my approach was to rehearsal most of the time. So, yeah.
So when those high school kids begin their college study, and let's face it, I mean, you're not dealing with the kids that are going to end up going to Eastman or Juilliard or Indiana or Michigan or something like that. I mean, I taught at a small school too. Vandercook was a trade school for band directors, for music teachers, So, but I mean, what did you think the biggest revelation those students had once they started working on a music education degree?
Oh, I guess by far it would be just workload and time commitment. I mean, and budgeting and organizing that time. I remember that being a little bit of a culture shock for me when I started too. So like, I remember when I was an undergraduate, I ran cross country too in college, and I'd always get to, it's not rehearsal, it's practice, right? I'd always get to practice late because I had classes that went till 4:00, right? And they started at 4. Some of them didn't have any classes at all in those days, and I had 6 classes almost every day or whatever. So again, so it's still the same, regardless if it's education or if it's performance or anything, that the workload is something that I spend a lot of time after rehearsal in the hall, in the office, talking with folks and say, hey, here's why. Just stay the course. This is why we do this. And it's hard, and learning to balance and budget your time in a way that gets you to where you want to be eventually seems to be the thing that other than just coursework that we deal with the most. And I get it. I understand. And of course, they have peers that are in the same boat, right? They have some of their friends that are biology majors that have 3 classes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's it, And but they have a full load every day. So workload and time commitment is a struggle. And but my gosh, I mean, that's what we have to have as band directors, right? I mean, look at all the things that we do. So your audience knows about that. So that's the biggest thing that I deal with. So
anything change in preparing kids in the college today from when you got your degree? Any changes you can see?
I think one of the first things that I talk about this in my literature class so much is that the music that we have now has come so far. I mean, when I first started teaching, we had good stuff out there, but I tell you what, we have composers composing at the grade 2 and 2.5 level right now that I tell you what, I wish I would have had some of those years ago when I was at Wright City or wherever it was I was at, because it's just absolutely wonderful music at that level. And it's a goal of mine to find that grade 2 or 2.5 chart every year that should be played by the president's own or the local middle school, to find that great, because I think there's some really great literature there. Now, the same thing happens in the area of jazz. We had good charts back then, but some of them were really hard. Now there's so much great music out there in the jazz era to teach from, and not to just play the latest, album off the latest albums, but to find stuff that really works for your band and it's going to move your folks forward. And there's so much great music out there for that right now. I guess the other thing would be, for me as an old guy, is technology, and how I can incorporate technology into my rehearsal format, not just my teaching my classes, but into my rehearsal format and stuff, and how to help with I wish I had YouTube when I was teaching earlier. I mean,
Oh,
don't you though? I mean,
absolutely.
you can see fingers, you can see embouchures, I mean, I I know you've done the same thing. Jazz tenor players and the emotion and the musicality they bring to some of those ballads they play. I mean, I prepared a YouTube clip in concert band of Branford Marsalis just playing a ballad with the most expression you could ever want from, like it's Pablo Casals on the cello, right? I mean, it's just so. I wish I'd had that earlier. So I use that now a lot, but I use some other technology. I think I'm sorry, you get me started here. I'm just rambling on here, but I think also like for instance, your book, The Essential Elements Interactive, the new book there. Oh my gosh. What a great teaching resource. That makes me think about how technology is going to even retain a pretty prominent place in our teaching, even outside of the pandemic, right? And how you can use that book, and there's some others out there similar, but that book in particular, in a flipped classroom concept.
Right.
And that's even made me think about how I do that with my college rehearsals too, and how I flip that concept of teaching and stuff. So yeah, boy, I tell you what, those kind of things are just so wonderful. And staying abreast of that is just really is hard, but there's lots of great stuff out there. So so those kind of things, I think.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you hit it right on the head. The music is really, there's some wonderful things being written by people, and technology. I mean, YouTube, maybe one of the great things of the pandemic is that we've all of a sudden found ourselves at home with time on our hands, and we've started to explore resources that, like, oh my gosh, there's just so many out there for us.
Yeah, isn't it the truth? I mean, and I mean, technology doesn't replace ears. I don't mean that, or just what we do in a concert situation, a concert band situation, or orchestra or choir, or whatever. But it's a means to reinforce those same traditional concepts that we teach and stuff. And that's how I find technology to be so wonderful and so engaging, I think, as to how we should teach. And I hope to improve on how I incorporate that. So
I love that answer. I'm going to come back to that answer here in just a second, but it takes young teachers some time to get their legs under them. So when you started, how long did you think it took you to really start feeling comfortable doing what you're doing? That you had your knowledge set and your skill set as a band director?
Charlie, I'm still searching, man. I mean, I'm still trying to get my legs under me in so many ways. And, I love to go to other concerts and hear what other people are playing and stuff. I mean, just the other day, talk about YouTube too. I was doing some research on Eric Whitacre's October, and to add to the rehearsal notes on the website. And I ran across Glenn Price rehearsing and teaching October on YouTube. I spent hours with that video. Oh my gosh. I played it again. I sat there with my score and I made notes. I have a whole nother idea about what that piece is about now. And same thing with and again, the resources we have, like you mentioned, are just so wonderful. Alan McMurray, and there's a video, I don't remember, a DVD, I don't know which one it is, but it's him rehearsing the second movement of Holst First. And the historical context that he brings to that, plus the music that he finds in that piece from beginning to end. Every time I watch that, I'm fascinated with that. And I've probably watched that a dozen times, and I'll watch it another dozen just in the next week, maybe. I don't know, I'm kidding, but I mean, it's just those kind of things. I guess if you feel like you know it all and you stop growing, then it's time to walk away from this, maybe. I don't know. I don't know that we ever really truly arrive. There's always that new piece, like you say, such great stuff being written. That new take on that first 15 minutes of rehearsal, right? How you build musicianship and you build skills, how somebody else is doing that, and how they've incorporated some technology into that aspect too. So I'm not there yet. This is year 42. I'm not there yet. So my advice, I guess my advice would be, please don't stop growing. Don't reach out. Don't stop learning. That's how we advance this art form. So
Yeah, you've alluded a couple of times to a resource that you've been developing, your website that you put together for yourself, and you shared me the link, and I thought it's very cool what you got going there. I mean, and I know it's just the start for yourself. Talk a little bit about that and what the motivation was to do that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's definitely a work in progress, Charlie. I mean, it really is. But
and give us the website also.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not searchable just yet. So I mean, I'd have to actually send you the link right now, because, well, I didn't want it to be. So what the premise of the website is that when I packed up all that stuff out of UMSL and left, that I had box after box after box. What do I do with it? So I didn't want just to pitch it, or leave it up to my daughter to pitch at some point. So I decided to find a place to store it. So the website thing came around, and it's intended to be a resource for the instrumental music educator. It has a lot of the articles I've written when I was part of MMEA. It has rehearsal, education, philosophy, things of that nature. A lot of the documents I used in my music ed classes. I've got a page that's just rehearsal notes of all the pieces I've conducted through the years and my take and interpretation of those. And then I've got a new teacher resource page also. And that's where I contacted you about some of those documents that I got from your class. And I hope that that's what it is. So right now I'm sharing it with former students and friends. And until I get the content up to where it should be. And I mean, there's 2 Excel files on there that charts that worked for me over the past 40 years. And the same thing with jazz. And so it's supposed to be, it's intended to be a resource. It's not, hey, look at Gary. That's not what it's about. But it's intended to be a resource. And I hope that's, if one person will at some point dial it up or go to it and find something they can use that might help in a rehearsal, job done. It's all good. So, so that's what it's about. So, like I say, I mean, it's a real long address right now because it's still not searchable because I'm still trying to add a lot of content. I've got a lot of content on it, but it's brandismusic.com will eventually be the searchable website.
That's cool. That's very, very cool. So if you were a young teacher entering the profession right now, what advice would you give yourself?
Easy. Find a mentor. Okay. Don't try to do this alone. You've got to be, and we've gotten past the place where we try to keep secrets, and thankfully, but you need to find someone who you can confide in, who you can ask, you feel comfortable asking questions. And I'm talking about content area mentor. Most schools have mentoring programs, right? But the English teacher doesn't understand how you manage your equipment, how you manage your program, how you manage selecting music. You need a content area mentor. I was real fortunate to have that. My college band director, he followed me after graduation and went to my concerts, Warren Bellis. And he didn't mind telling me, Brandis, you're doing that wrong. and he would. And then Normandy High School was right next door to UMSL, and Bob Bogus and Herb Duncan were there, teachers there. And I just go and those guys. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I'd go hang out in Bob's room. I just show up and hang out in Bob's room. Bob's forgotten more about teaching than I'll ever know. Okay. And he still, to me, is just a teacher's teacher. But anyway, I think, and Herb still, Still trying to help. So, and I appreciate that. I think those guys, in a way, kind of felt sorry for my future students, and they go, "Hey, before we let this guy out there, we got to fix this," So anyway, so they were just so wonderful, and I relied on Bob until I probably just pushed him away. I don't know, but he was such a great resource for me. And so, yeah, find somebody that you can confide in, that you trust, that you feel is doing the right thing, or is doing the right thing, and reach out to them. And so now I'm trying to do that as well. I try to stay in touch with my former students. We pay it forward, right? It worked for me, and I hope that I can help. I mean, we got to get through this teacher shortage, and research tells us that mentoring process is one of the things that helps retain teachers, and the retention rate is greater if you have a very active and kind of positioned mentoring process in place. And I think those are the things that we have to, as educators, it's part of our obligation right now to make sure that we have people to maintain this art form. So mentoring is something that I feel very strongly in, and that would be my best advice.
I totally agree with you. I'm going to make one exception to this, and hear me out on it. I think the word mentor needs to be changed, because there's a certain inference with the word mentor that somebody's going to be looking over my shoulder all the time or putting a roof over my head. And that's certainly not the case. I think we think of mentoring, I think of that as a rear view mirror type term. I mean, I think what you're really looking for is just find somebody that you can ask questions to. Find a friend out there that's going to tell you, hey, you got a booger hanging out of your nose here, right? Listen to those third clarinets, man. You're missing the boat here, right? That's somebody that's just going to be your friend and going to look after you. And they're not going to tell you what to do. They're going to, they'll answer the questions, and they'll ask you the right questions so that you come up with the right answer. They'll ask you those guiding questions along the way.
Exactly.
I want to come up with a new term besides mentor, though, somewhere along the way.
No, yeah, I understand. You're exactly right. You really are. I remember, Bob Bogus was kind enough to say, "Hey, Brandis, you want to go with me on this marching trip?" And we were going someplace, and he said, he asked me to do something. I said, "Bob, I don't know what." He goes, "I'm not going to tell you, just go do it." Okay. And so he wasn't going to hold my hand. He was going to make sure that I figured out how to get the job done. And so, yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's not, it's somebody that's going to be honest with you and keep you kind of pointed in the right direction, but they're not going to, well, yeah, no, you're exactly right. So I think you're right. There's sometimes that it's not necessarily that always that safety net, but it's someone that's going to help you with your profession along the way.
Yeah, we got to find a new word for it.
I follow you. Yeah.
So let's shift gears for a second. I know you mentioned you played trumpet, but you're really now a trombonist. And at least prior to the pandemic, it seemed like you kept a really pretty busy performance schedule. So why is it important for band directors to keep their chops up once they start teaching?
I always told my folks in my classes, my music ed majors, that we can only teach to our own personal level of musicianship, whatever that might be. So for me, staying on the horn made me more connected with what I was asking from the podium, and it still is. Now I had the fortune to play in a lot of jazz things as well, and I didn't know how to teach jazz very well. I played a lot of it. But being around those folks helped me understand how you get to a place where you're a better teacher of jazz. But it raised my level of musicianship. The best thing I ever did was playing a brass quintet, and there was no place to hide, and it raised my level of musicianship. And I had to take care of what I was responsible for. So yeah, I encourage folks, my students, to stay active, stay playing, so that you're you're making legitimate requests from the podium, I guess, as to what your expectations and what you're asking for as a player. And so that's what I always tried to do. Plus, I just enjoy keeping the horn in the face. And this pandemic's allowed me time to practice more. And so last month I decided I was going to start at the beginning of the row shoe, and I was going to work my way all the way through again, right? And so I didn't do very well. I started skipping around because some of them. but I'm on like number 9 now, and I'll probably skip 10 because it's pretty hard. But yeah, so it's just fun to play again, and so I would hope that we all stay active as musicians, because again, it makes what we do from the box, from the podium, more a legitimate request, I think. So
yeah. I also read on your bio that you're involved with the St. Louis Wind Symphony. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, so the St. Louis Wind Symphony is kind of a semi-pro kind of community band here in St. Louis, and it started in around 1998. Dan Presgrave was the founder. He had he was a director of bands at Washington University, and he and some friends started this ensemble, and I joined them in 2006 as just someone in the trombone section. And gosh, it's a great band. There's some just marvelous musicians in that band. Most of them are teachers. We've got your doctor, your lawyer, and things of that nature. But most of them have just great background on their instrument, and they're just some terrific musicians. It's a pleasure to stand in front of them. Well, then Dan retired, and Tom Poshak became the music director. And I think Dan and Tom got together, and I think they kind of figured I could do less damage in front of the band than I could back in the trombone section. So they handed me a stick, and so. But what a thrill it's been to be in front of an ensemble. Like I've got to do some music that I could only dream about doing, and it's a great organization, and I'm just grateful and fortunate to be able to be a part of it. So. Yeah.
That's great. There's an old story that Vic Firth told me one time about, and I'm going to get it not right, but anyhow, but the composer, the conductor said something to somebody and says, if you can't play this right, we're going to give you a pair of sticks and stick you back there, saying to the percussion section. And I guess Vic Firth said, yeah, and if you can't handle it back here, we'll take one of your sticks away and put you up there.
Right. Exactly. I've heard that too. Right. Yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
They took my horn away and gave me a stick. So yeah.
Well, you also served as president of the Missouri Music Educators along the way. You've been very involved with that. And you received many honors from all your work. But why is it important for teachers at all levels to remain active in their state and local professional organizations?
Well, not only is it a great network for us as professionals, musicians, and teachers, but MMA has been so great. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have to ever tell somebody why music or art is important, right? But MMA has allowed me the opportunity to advocate for music at the state and the federal level. I've been to Jefferson City, I've been to Washington, D.C. It's being part of MMA and MBA and all those kind of things has kept me more informed about how I can help my art form, how I can best advocate for it, how I can help to make sure that my art form that I love has a future, all those kind of things. And so, advocacy needs to be part of the band, choir, orchestra, general music teacher's daily agenda. It's not something we do when things are in trouble or when it goes bad. It's something that we do on a regular basis. Just last week, we fired off some messages here from MAE started a call to action drive about some Senate bills that were on the floor. And, it's important to stay abreast of all those things. And I try to share those with my music ed students at the university as well. Advocacy, yeah, it's not somebody else's job. It's our job to keep music and to keep this art form in a prominent place for our young people and in our schools. And so MMEA has allowed me those opportunities, and MMEA has taught me how to be an advocate that's, I guess, is saying the right things, is looking in the right direction, is speaking to the right people. And so MMEA has been really good for me, and I've been fortunate and just learned so much being around all those good people that are MMEA. So yeah, we have to stay very active in what it means for music in our schools, and that's taught me. Of course, it taught me a lot of leadership things too, right? It taught me how to get along with people and how to work with people. But I think that's the big takeaway for me is staying current and how music and where music belongs in our schools.
Yes, it keeps you active, keeps you young. Okay, a couple of quick short answer ones here as we wrap this thing up. Favorite piece of music?
Can we go two directions? Let's go conduct and then maybe play.
Sure.
Yeah. If to conducting, I don't know where. Sorry, I guess Mark Camphouse's A Movement for Rosa. Oh my gosh! I mean, that piece is so moving, and there's just I've done it several times, and I've never done it the same way twice. I mean, there's just another way to do it. David Gillingham's With Heart and Voice, also. Oh my gosh, what a great piece, and what a fun ride that is to conduct. But Be Thou My Vision, Gillingham also. Oh Lord, I mean, geez, I don't know. So I could go on forever here, but to play, that's easy. Tchaikovsky 6. It is. I've played it twice, and I'm practicing again, hoping somebody's going to call me a third time. I mean, my God, as a trombone player, that's it, right?
Okay, you can have lunch with any composer. Who would it be? What would you talk about?
This is interesting. I've actually talked about this in my literature class, and it would be easy. It'd be John Barnes Chance. Okay, I'd want to talk to John, and I'd want to say, John, dogs don't need electric fences. Okay, I mean, what a tragedy, right?
Right.
We lost him at the age of 39. Where would band music be if we had 30 more years of his composition? I mean, I'd love to sit with him and say, Blue Lake Overture. How? Where did that come from? Variations on a Korean folk song. I mean, just who doesn't love that piece? He was one of the first composers, I think, early on that really started writing well for percussion. I mean, and he was kind of a trendsetter in that. At least I feel like he was. Incantation and Dance. Oh my gosh, I mean, just standards. And so he would be one that I would love to wish, and I think it's just it's tragedy that we didn't have more of his music, I feel.
I did a podcast earlier this year with Richard Miles, teaching music through performance. Yeah. Richard was at Morehead State, and we had finished the recording, and then we're talking offline after. And he and I wish I'd have kept the recording going, but he talked about, he was a young kid, and he went into a band concert or a band festival, I guess it was. His parents were doing something else, and he's sitting in this auditorium, and the band on stage is playing Incantation and Dance, and Richard is like mesmerized by this, and he turns to the gentleman next to it, and he goes, "That's the greatest piece of music I've ever heard in my life." You hear Richard talking. Yeah. And it was John Barnes Chance sitting next to him. And he said,
that awesome?
He said, I wrote that piece. And so Richard told the story. I can't remember all of what he said, but he said, I program that so often when I do an honor band or something like that, just because of the memory that I had meeting him. And I tell that story, and very cool.
Cool. His second symphony is just terrific. Can you imagine there wasn't a third, right? What the third would have been like? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's just, anyway. So yeah, what a tragedy. So
how about a musician? If you could have any musician have lunch with?
It's easy. I've said this a bunch of times. Pablo Casals. So my trombone teacher made me play all those cello suites. and he said, go listen to him replay those things. And I'm thinking, my God, how does he do that? So, I mean, and talk about how to get so much music out of one single line. It would be Pablo Casals. And then somebody else, and I mentioned this earlier, is Alan McMurray. Alan, of course, was a trumpet player here with St. Louis Symphony for a while. And I think that Alan is just a wonderful musician. Watching him rehearse, he did the All-State Band here in Missouri at least once, maybe twice. And I neglected doing responsibilities at MMEA I had at that time just to go watch him rehearse. I've never walked away from a rehearsal or recording or a DVD of his that I haven't learned something musically, not just with the baton in hand, but musically. So yeah, love to visit.
He's one of the coolest people in the world, one of those humble guys in the world. I spend the winters out in California. I kind of get away from the snow,
Yeah.
And Alan lives like a half an hour from me, and we play golf a couple times a winter. And every time I'm around him, I just learn something. He's just such a gracious, kind human being. He's wonderful.
Yeah, I'd love to get to know him better. No, and I'm a huge admirer. So
I'll give him a call. He'd talk to you.
I'd love to sometime.
Next time I talk to him, I say, you got a fan in St. Louis. You need to get
All
out.
right, please.
Absolutely. Okay. So then what's the biggest thrill you ever had as a music teacher?
Oh my gosh. Well, okay. So one of the last tours I did with my high school band at Zumwalt South, yeah, it was Zumwalt South, was we did a millennial tour. And it took us out east. I premiered a new piece by Dr. Ring, and then we performed different places in and around the Capitol, on the Capitol steps, and we marched in a parade there. And I tell you what, just to be there during that time and to be a part of that was a super thrill. I mean, it really was. That was great. And I think past that, we had this composer kind of series that I did at UMSL, where I would invite in a composer to come and to rehearse, and then he would give him an opportunity to work with some area high schools as well. And so I had several of those, and they were all terrific. So in each one of those was a unique and just a wonderful moment, for me. So getting to work closely with those guys was just wonderful. So those are the kind of things. Playing, standing in front of the St. Louis Wind Symphony at MMEA. That was a great time.
That's great. That's great. You mentioned playing around the Capitol. When I student taught with Jerry Hoover at Jeff City.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And during the time I was student teaching, he took his band to Washington, D.C. And one of the pieces he was playing was Billick's American Civil War Fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
And it happened that President Ford was speaking to the National Chamber of Commerce, and somehow Hoover manipulated the fact to get his band in to listen to President Ford's speech.
Jerry could make that work, right?
Oh, yeah, Jerry could do anything, right? And so Jerry says, you go in and save me a seat. So I go in, and there's no Hoover. He doesn't show up. And finally, about 45 minutes later, he comes in. And, Jerry Hoover has that laugh that's just, and he's laughing. And I said, Mr. Hoover, what happened? And he goes, oh, man. He said, I had the shotgun shell blanks in my sport coat pocket for American Civil War Fantasy. And when I went through the metal detector, it set him off and the Secret Service hauled his butt away.
That's a great story. Oh my gosh, only Jerry, right?
Only Hoover. Hoover. Okay, last question, man. If I didn't become a band director, I would have become a blank.
Oh boy. Orchestra director. No. I think a pilot. I've flown a little bit. Yeah, I've done a little flying, but there's always been somebody in the right seat. But if it's still a bucket list thing, but I don't know if I can afford it anymore. But I think there just seems to be so much freedom with that, and so I'd like to maybe maybe have tried to become a pilot, perhaps. So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Gary, this has been fun, man. Any final words of wisdom you want to share?
Oh gosh. I don't know if it's wisdom, Charlie, but I mean, if there's any, just younger teachers out there, music ed, I mean, I'd start over in a heartbeat. I mean, I would. I'd do it all again. It's been fun. It's been great. It's a great way to live. And it's a lot of work, but I mean, I guess the things that you love, everything that you love or that you have a passion for is a lot of work. So follow your passion. Let money take care of itself. And again, I'd start over if they'd let me go back. I don't know if I've got another 42 years on me, but I'd like to try, because it's been a great life. It really has.
That's great. Gary, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, buddy.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. This has been an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you. So good to see you again as well.
Gary Brandis is a lifer, one of those people in our profession who just loves teaching, and he loves it for all the right reasons. I'm sure the folks at Lindenwood are super excited to have Gary working with them and their band program. And I know those students are going to get a great, solid musical experience with a real professional. And Gary, keep working on your website. It's a great resource that you're putting together. I don't think it's public yet, but I hope you make it available to the rest of us in the profession soon. Keep it going, Gary. I wish you the best of luck. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends, episode 46. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our sponsors, and special thanks to today's guest, Gary Brandis. I'll be back with more great conversations, but for now, this is your host, Charlie Mangini, saying thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.